And now we will hear a welcome from our chapter president, Nas Afi.
Thank you, Ms. Fauntleroy. And again, I also want to say thank you everyone for your patience, as we thought they would be in any moment, and that just didn't happen. So we're moving forward. Good afternoon, and I bid you a warm welcome to today's candidate forum. We applaud all of you for taking the time out of your busy midday afternoon on a Saturday, no less, to convene around the importance of hearing from those who are intending and wishing to serve their community in Anne Arundel County, those who have put their hat in the ring as candidates for the Anne Arundel County Council, as well as the executive county exec. Now, we all can agree it's important to be informed about the community issues and how the candidates see those issues, and how will the candidates work to address those issues and to bring change to empower the community and to change our community into thriving communities across all of Anne Arundel County. That is the order of the day. That is why you have candidates here today who, again, are wishing to talk with you about their plans, about their goals, where their thoughts are around how we build up Anne Arundel County, how we transform the county, how we make its residents ready and empowered to do all the things that they are capable of doing, how we assist and how we support them. So I want to thank, on behalf of our chapter, I want to thank all of the candidates who agreed to be here today, because you're showing how important it is for you that you connect with the community, that you connect with community leaders. And so we thank you. And I won't call anybody by name because our capable moderator, Michelle Schoonmaker, will do that for all the candidates. However, I do want to give a really, really deep thank you to our partners today in this venture. That is the NAACP of Anne Arundel County, the Caucus of African American Leaders, March on Maryland, the National Pan-Hellenic Council of Anne Arundel County, The Links Incorporated, and of course, last but not least, our sisters, the sorors of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, in the chapter of the North Arundel County Alumni Chapter. We thank you, sisters, for joining us and helping to bring this to our community and to our members. And without further ado, I want to turn it over to, I believe, Michelle. But I just want to say another heartfelt thank you for everyone being here today. You show commitment, you show dedication, you show interest, and you show that you value what you hear from communities and what you bring to community. Thank you very much. Best of luck to everyone. Michelle?
Thank you so much. So I did want to start with some housekeeping. As a reminder, this event is being recorded. A link to the recording will be available to the public shortly after the event. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and today's partner organizations are nonpartisan community organizations. Our organizations do not endorse any specific candidates. We offer opportunities such as this for all candidates to present to the community, and we organize advocacy efforts around community issues to influence those who do end up in office. We recognize that the candidacy filing deadline was extended as the primary election was rescheduled this year. We did invite all candidates, regardless of party affiliation, who had filed and were listed with the Board of Elections as of March 25th Please be mindful that not every candidate speaking today will be listed on the primary ballot this election cycle. Unfortunately, not every invited candidate was able to join us this afternoon, though we, again, thank all the individuals who choose to run and thank those who are able to join us this afternoon. So we will begin with candidate introductions, and I will do my best because I'm going to move in alphabetical order based on my list. Do my best to make sure I pronounce everybody's name correctly. So please correct me at any point. But starting, because unfortunately our county executive does not seem to be on our call at this point, I will jump to the county council candidates. So beginning with John C. Dove Jr. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be on here today. My name is John C. Dove Jr. I'm a candidate for county council over in District 4 of Anne Arundel County. That is, excuse me, the Piney Orchard area, Odenton, Maryland City, Laurel, Russet, parts of Gambrills, parts of Severn, parts of Two Rivers, Crofton. What am I missing there? And I believe I've hit Seven Oaks, excuse me. Seven Oaks in that part. I am a native of Hampton, Virginia. I'm an Army brat. I've traveled all over the place growing up, attended public schools in Alabama, made it here to the Naval Academy, 1987, graduated, met my wife shortly thereafter, Rhonda Caldwell Dove, and left and brought her back home in 1993. And I've been a resident of this county ever since, been a resident of District 4 since 1994. I currently and have worked for the last 30 years in the medical device field. I've been a sales rep. I've been a medical technician. I've also been a sales director there. I continue to work with patients both in and out of the hospital, in and out of emergency rooms, in and out of doctor's offices. I'm working with a local startup now. I'm a treasurer at St. Mark United Methodist Church. I've been in the finance committee there for probably about 20 years working. And I continue to contribute with my kids through various functions throughout the county. My wife is involved in several organizations here in the county. I decided to run for office because it's that time in my life and career where I can get a little bit closer to the community and give back. I've recently retired from my original occupation with Medtronic in 2020, and now I'm able to give more and more time to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving next to James R. Estep.
That's Estep, thank you. And thank you for having us. Really appreciate you guys taking the time and setting up this forum so that we'd have the opportunity to have this conversation. It means a lot. Mr. Dove's already given the border, so no reason to repeat who's a part of it. You all know who you are, and I'm delighted to have a chance to potentially serve you. I am James R. Estep. I'm, as all my colleagues on the Democratic side, in my mid-50s and a proud parent and a proud husband and or wife, as we all are. And it's a great opportunity. The pandemic and seeing what people suffered through convinced me that, that this needed to be done. We have to step up, all of us who can, and we have to make certain that we help the most people we can every single day of our lives. And I can't think of a better way to do it than elective office. My father was on the Prince George's County Council for 8 years. He was also the youngest and longest serving fire chief in county history. For the last 18 years, he and I have worked together. We combine business with the community, whether it's faith-based, whether it's educational, whether it's our active duty and veterans. And we find a way to put all those folks together to do the best good that we can. And we are also the advocacy group for Joint Base Andrews in Maryland through the state. So proud of that. I am father of 5, all the way from 23 down to 14 months. So I cut a wide swath as far as that goes. I will be using all our county services for, and my children will for the rest of my natural life, I would assume. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Julie Hummer.
Unmute. Good afternoon. Thank you for organizing this. A great opportunity for us all to learn about all the candidates. I'm also running for District 4 County Council. I'm a former special education teacher a wife and daughter of U.S. Army veterans and a mother of 5 children. My kids have all been going through Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I counted it up. We have spent 59 years so far in individual school years within the county. And I began my career, as I said, as a teacher, and that just led in naturally as being a mother and a PTA parent, and just really getting involved on the local level for the schools and for our community. I served on the Anne Arundel County Board of Education for 5.5 years. And through that, I was able to do a lot of really important things for our children and families, from advancing equity initiatives to advocating for the Blueprint for Education to approving record levels of school construction. But I also saw again and again that many issues that impact the success and achievement of our children and our families happen outside of the school day. I want to continue my service at the county level so I can address these areas, from well-paying jobs to affordable housing to access to healthcare, safe and walkable neighborhoods, more parks and green spaces throughout the county, including parts of our areas that are historically underserved. Because if we want our children and our families to thrive, we've got to ensure that they all have access to all the opportunities that lead to success. So I'm looking forward to continuing my service from the school side to the county level to address more and more of the issues that come out. And I've been living here in Anne Arundel County for 20 years now. And I look forward to living here much longer and doing my best to make it better for all families.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Sean Livingston.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today and giving us the opportunity to speak to everybody. A little bit about me. I grew up in Calvert County, just a little bit south of Anne Arundel County. And my wife grew up in Lothian, which is all the way at the bottom of Anne Arundel County. We actually knew each other in high school and dated for a couple of years in high school. And we chose to move to Annapolis when we got married because my wife's a nurse at the hospital. We have 2 little kids, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I work at a school in Annapolis doing IT work. I also work part-time at a church as a children's and youth pastor. We're just regular working people of Anne Arundel County, and we are trying to provide for our family and make our community a better place. It can be hard to make ends meet, and we know that. You know, sometimes we have to make overtime just to, well, maybe not to get by, but in order to live a life that you know is more comfortable. It's not easy to get by here. As I've been kind of, you know, following politics for several years, I've been really impressed with our current administration and the council and all the things that they've passed, supporting our teachers and our medical workers and our first responders. And so I'm coming here and I'm asking, how can I help? Where do I fit into this? And as long as I can remember, my mom always taught me that I need to ask how I can help. Everywhere we went growing up, whether it was a church or a community center or a wedding, it didn't matter. She would find the person in charge and she would say, how can we help? I've got my boys here and we're ready to help. And in college, I had a near-death experience that brought all those things back. And I realized that's how I wanted to do my life. And from that day forward, everything in my life was centered around people and how I can help. It's why I work at a church. It's why I work at a school. It's why I work for the family business. And it's why now I want to serve, because I want to make sure that the community my kids grow up in is the best place that it can be. I want to make sure that the change that we've seen with the current administration continues. And I want to make sure that District 7 has representation working for the people, and that's finding the people and listening to the people. And I want to tackle legislation that matters to you. So that's why I'm doing it. It's a little bit about me, and I look forward to answering more questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Carl Niemeyer.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Carl Niemeyer, running for County Council in District 5, which is Arnold, Severna Park, Cape St. Clair, a little bit of Millersville edges over there. And a little bit about me. I am a father of 5. My wife and I moved here in 2013, courtesy of the United States Navy. I was last stationed at United States Naval Academy doing construction management for 2 years after spending 4 lovely years in California and 2 lovely deployments to Afghanistan when our first kids were born. We came to this area and fell in love with it, never wanted to go back, and we're originally from Pittsburgh, so we understand the back and forth between this area and where we originally grew up and how wonderful of a place this is. All the places we've been in the country, Florida, Virginia, California, and everywhere in between, this is the place we wanted to put down roots and raise our kids right here in District 5. I also have a business in District 5, Berber Mechanical, where I'm sitting at today, lovely blue. You'll see our vans on the road. I employ 75 workers, all of them union, steam fitters, electricians, and sorry, running in District 7. Yes, Sean. And carpenters and laborers. So I come to this candidacy because District 5 is a phenomenal place to raise a family and to work out of. We have Fort Meade in our backyard. We have the Naval Academy down the street. We have people that work in Baltimore, work in DC, that serve the federal government, and serve your communities daily. And as great as Anne Arundel County is, District 5 can do better. I've watched the last 4 years where budgets weren't approved, and it was a constant fight coming out of our county councilwoman. And we knew, my wife and I knew, that we could just have a great impact, not just for our kids, but for everyone around us. We have great trails, we have roads, but we have traffic. We have great places to live, but we have nowhere affordable that our teachers can live. We have some of the best schools in Anne Arundel County, but they got overcrowded as soon as new ones were built. We knew that there were much better steps that could be taken to make District 5 and the county as a whole a better place to live. I stand here as a business owner fighting for fair wages every day, and I want to bring that to the county council. That's going to be one of my biggest priorities, is that everyone that lives here, that works here, can make a fair wage, and that the money they make here stays here. So thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Lisa Rodvian.
Thank you very much. I'm Lisa Rodvian, and I'm running for re-election for the seat that I currently hold, representing Anne Arundel County Council District 6, which is the city of Annapolis. So I actually do represent the city, even though they have a lot of their own representation, including the mayor and their city alder people. And then I represent about 16 precincts that are outside the city limits that are between the Severn River and the South River. And thanks to our redistricting, I have now I now represent a number of precincts that were formerly in District 4, including Millersville area, and I had half of Crownsville before. Now I have the rest of Crownsville. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know that new part of District 6. I started out my professional career as an attorney working in education law. After several years in that field, I decided I really wanted to work directly in education. So I went back to school and got my master's degree in education and became a public school teacher. My husband is former Army, so we started out moving around. In my professional career as a teacher, I started out moving around in different places, and we eventually landed in Maryland, where he works at Fort Meade. And I was really excited to become a teacher in Maryland, which, you know, has the reputation of being one of the best states for education in the entire country. But I got discouraged because even here in Anne Arundel County, in the wonderful state of Maryland that I have adopted as my home, I saw shortcomings. I saw things that I knew needed to be improved. I knew that our students, we still had students falling through the cracks. We had class sizes too large. We had teachers that were leaving due to compensation issues. And so that was really the thing that motivated me to run for office. I also care deeply about environmental issues. And as I knocked several thousand doors in 2018, I learned that one of the biggest concerns among residents, especially in District 6, but throughout the county, is affordable housing. And over the past 4 years, it's in a lot of ways, it's, you know, I think it's even more challenging because the real estate market has been so hot. So I'm running for re-election because I feel like we've done a lot of good work. I want to continue, I want to make sure that that work isn't undone, but I also want to continue on the good work that we have done so far. And I am truly hoping to serve a second term. So thank you.
Thank you. And last up, we have David Scambalone.
Thank you. My name is David Scambalone. I'm running for County Council District 2. I will apologize for any background noise. I do have the kids right now. It's unavoidable, but they're pretty well occupied right now. So I'm an engineer and a father of 3. And I've been living in Anne Arundel County for 9 years and really enjoy the community, really enjoy living here. And as an engineer, it's my job to solve problems. So I've always been interested in politics, often read big philosophy tomes for fun. My wife thinks it's crazy, but I get a kick out of it. And one thing I've noticed is this, we've been moving the wrong direction for a long time, because no matter what party's in office, we're always getting bigger government, more spending, more taxes, and the services really aren't increasing that much. We're not getting the bang for a buck. So it's time to reverse the trend here. So rather than being an armchair philosopher, I'm going to run for office and myself, get some new ideas out there, some fresh things, try to clean up the budget, try to get taxes down, get regulations down so businesses can move in and build more jobs, get more housing in with less zoning laws as well. So a lot of priorities there. And of course, school choice is a big thing I'm running on too. Try to get more choice, better education system, competition in the market. And it's just, yeah, so just look forward to any questions, and I look forward to here, and thank you for having me on the forum.
Thank you so much, everybody. So we will shift into our questions. With today's event, we wanted to cover some of the community concerns. And as everybody has heard, our candidates have kind of noted some of their priorities. With that being said, I am going to ask that we kind of just move in the same order to keep things simple. I know we're all still figuring out how to do these Zoom formats. So to make it simple, we'll just kind of go in that order again. And starting with this first question. As more and more residents return to work in the office, many of us are experiencing that press of constant traffic. How would you use your position to address challenges of private and public transit within the county? And how would you leverage resources to connect the county to surrounding areas? And we will start things off with Mr. Dove.
Okay, can you repeat that one more time? Let me make sure I got that question totally.
Absolutely. How would you use your position to address challenges of private and public transit within the county? And how would you leverage resources to connect the county to surrounding areas?
Okay, let's start with the public piece of things. I know there's a transportation plan that the county executive is working on and put forward. I think that first thing is making sure we fund that. One of the things that I want to focus on is transportation equity, both within the school system and outside the school system. I know Virginia has some great ideas of using private transportation and funding that publicly for those that do not have cars. We do not have a fantastic bus system here in the county. We do not have a van system here in the county. I know Maryland Live does a great job of transporting their employees, but anybody else that wants to get to a job, those buses, those private vans are not available if you do not own your own car. So we've got to look at whether we can come up with a program similar to Virginia's, where people that are a certain income level can get those transportation needs. From a working with other areas of the state, I know Howard County is looking at something like that. I'm not sure about PG, but we should be able to work with those folks to look and see what might work and what doesn't work. From a private perspective, some of that still goes back to the public piece. The better the public transportation is, the more people we can get off the road. If we can come up with a better bus system and come up with a better van system, we're going to get more folks off the road. Infrastructure also plays into that. The better we can do with getting some of our needs done with 198, with Route 3, with fixing those problems, our transportation will definitely get better. But right now, it's absolutely a challenge. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, Mr. Eastep.
Hi, thank you. Well, one of the areas that we are challenged by being in Anne Arundel County is that we're, in many ways a throughway for those who wish to go from Prince George's to Baltimore City or places north, as we see on 3 and 97 continually. And as you know, those are state highways, so we have, at least 3 is, so we have challenges regarding how we can work the funds. But I will say, as a current member of the Democratic Central Committee in Anne Arundel County, I have had a good deal of the last 2 decades making relationships. And I think it's important to have relationships at MDOT. It's important to have relationships at SHA and be able to leverage some of those to hit the ground running and maybe take care of some of the folks and some of the needs that we have and at least get conversations going. I also want to give credit to the current holder of the seat, Councilman Pruski. I think he's done a fantastic job advocating, and I think when he is elected to the Maryland House of Delegates, it's going to be a benefit to them. I will say my backyard of Odenton has been benefited greatly by the additional 2.6 million that's headed into the MARC station there. That's going to make improvements in and around that area, and that's going to help with walking, with sidewalks, with some of the things that lack now, and with infrastructure there. That's going to be incredibly important. I did mention that Councilman Pruski's work that has led to $800,000 in investment coming that's going to help with design all the way up from Watchapel Road all the way up to the St. Stephen's area as you approach 97. So money is there. As far as partnerships, something I've suggested before, and I think we need to find a way to leverage as a community, is to say, if the DOD is going to bring all these jobs and many benefits to Fort Meade, as we see the uptick in DISA and NSA and with Cyber Command, we need to also have the federal government start to invest in the communities outside the base so that we, the county, and this community reap some of the benefits of having that happen. Mr. Dove has mentioned Prince George's. I think they are willing to have partnerships from Bowie up, but that is something we'd have to coordinate, because as of now, there's no real, how do we fix the problems at the border as much as going into the rest of it. But there's no reason we can't have a dialogue with anybody. They're going to have transition there, and their District 4 will have a new county council person as well. So perhaps we'll start that dialogue right away. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hummer.
Yes, I think everyone will agree that we have a dearth of public transportation in the county. The trains are wonderful if you work in DC or Baltimore, but how do you get to the trains? Our biggest job producers are the Fort, BWI, the hospitals, and Maryland Live, but for much of the county can take hours to get there if you use public transportation with the buses. So we need to invest more. We need to have more rapid commute buses that can take people from a centralized area straight to those sites. As Mr. Dove said, Maryland Live, it does a great job of transporting their people. Why can't some of our other businesses work with the county to do the same thing? Some centralized pickup spots with vans or buses to bring the employees to where they need to be, to the Fort, to the hospitals. A central pickup area in South County to bring people in, a central one in West County to bring people to the other areas. So we need to invest more and have that. And the more we get people on public transportation, whether it be vans, buses, or trains, the fewer cars we're going to have on the road, which will improve our traffic. The good thing that's coming through is just billions of dollars. We're just being allocated for the federal infrastructure bill, which can really improve some of our roads and increase that and open up the possibilities for greater transportation. The MARC station is getting much needed improvements in Odenton, but also the racetrack in Laurel is pushing to add another train stop there that would help for commuters in that West County, Prince George's, Howard, Anne Arundel County connection. And those are things we really need to advocate for between counties, the counties working together to increase those opportunities for workers, because let's get people to where the jobs are.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston.
Yeah, this is a great question. I don't want to, the things that I'm naturally thinking are obviously very similar to what everybody else has said so far. So I don't want to just keep saying the same things, but it's a really important issue for my district in particular, District 7 is all of South County and then up to Crofton. So it's a really big district geographically. And we have neighborhoods with people that don't have cars, and we have a lot of elderly people in the district. And so we have that issue. And then we also have, because it's so big, we've got all of these roads. I mean, we border Route 3, we have 214, we have Route 2. And we were talking about, Julie was just talking about the money coming, the federal money. And I'm sure you've all seen on Facebook, the county executive has been touting how we're going to be able to use that money for our roads. And I think that's really great. And we need to make sure that that happens and that it's managed well. And then James was talking about on our state roads, which those are, making sure that, you know, we have an open line of communication. And I think that's really important as well. In South County, we actually have a program called Call and Ride. That's really great. It gets people, you can call an hour ahead of time. Someone will literally come to your house and take you wherever you want up to Edgewater. So if you have a doctor's appointment, if you're an elderly person or someone without a car, you can use that service. The biggest problem I see with that service is that it just isn't communicated very well. That's the biggest problem. And if people knew more about it, it would get used more, I believe. The second problem with it is the hours are limited. So I think we need to continue to invest more money into that program and expand it to the weekends. Let's see, oh yeah, then the other thing that is important, and this is for the whole county, obviously, is our sidewalk system. And currently the executive has this walk and roll commission going on to learn where the sidewalks would be best. And I think about specifically in District 7 around where our schools are, Southern High School, South River, some of our elementary schools. There's not safe places for kids to walk. And so I think that we need to continue investing in infrastructure, not just for our cars and our public transit, but also into our sidewalks, so that we have safe spaces, especially for our kids. And yeah, I think that I could talk about transportation for a while, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Mr. Niemeyer.
So I have the wonderful pleasure of being the district that has the Bay Bridge. So for us, you know, our biggest concern, especially as we roll up to the summer, is how much traffic we are going to deal with trying to go home. When I try and leave my office route on Ritchie Highway, I can look and see it's going to take an hour and a half for some of my workers to get back across the bridge that live over on the shore. And I can look to my friends that live down in Revel Downs and over by Bayhead Park, and they can expect to take a solid 50 minutes to get from Severna Park back to their house if on a good day, because we have some significant challenges with the area, with people kind of try to work around Route 50, and most importantly, with the aging spans of the bridge that need to be replaced. Now, I'm not going to try and say that the county council has every power in its pocket to suddenly build a multi-billion-dollar bridge. However, I think my experience as an engineer, as a business owner, and as somebody that's been dealing with transportation logistics for a very long time, I'll bring a very good perspective to pushing the council forward and continuing to communicate with the Department of Transportation, with federal agencies to bring the funding that's needed to bring the right solution to replacing the bridge spans, to get us 4 lanes in each direction at a minimum to come back and forth across the bridge. There's a lot going on, a lot of development, a lot of people wanting to move over there, and they're going to be running right through the middle of District 5. We've done a lot with the Severn River Bridge to expand it. That's helped a good bit, but it hasn't done enough to alleviate that summer traffic. Now, also, we're looking at the College Parkway backing up. We have traffic issues there where we're having more and more development, more and more homes kind of just recklessly being thrown up here and there, which is increasing our car capacity on College Parkway. And I had the pleasure of sitting with the Transportation Council and Transportation Commission, excuse me, and hearing their ideas and seeing where they've been going, what they've been working on for the county executive. And they've got some phenomenal ideas about how to put more public transportation into the area to reduce the amount of cars on the road. You know, here simply, if I go up and down Ritchie Highway, I don't even really know where the bus stops are. There's no real safe way to get to a bus stop. There's no bus shelter, no bus pad. There's a sign sitting on the side of the road and somebody sitting with their feet near hanging over the side of the road when people are screaming down Ritchie Highway at 75 miles an hour. The answer is not really how do I get more room for cars, but how do I get less cars on the road? How do I make this a more walking friendly, more public transportation friendly District 5? We also have some great advantages here. We're a very suburban area of the county. We've got a great trail system that is continuing to grow in the area, and I'd like to see that continue on. So as for what I can do in office, it's really going to be hound dogging the commissions to make sure we get the bridge done. It is going to be a 10 to 15 year process. We are going to be sitting here for a long time waiting for that bridge to get built. But the more and more we wait to do it, the longer and longer those 10 to 15 years of construction are going to be pushed into the future. So I want to see action now, and that's what I'm going to work for.
Great, thank you. Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you. I think a lot of the folks on this panel have really great ideas, and that's really encouraging to hear. One of the things that I have done and I've worked on my colleagues with that has a big impact on transit is controlling the development patterns in our county. So obviously, if you have, think of New York City, you've got very high density, you've got wonderful public transit because there's a lot of people that can use it. There's a lot of people living in close spaces. So the more that we can encourage that kind of development called transit-oriented development, where you have, in fact, Odenton Town Center is a really great example of transit-oriented development. You have a higher density close to a MARC train station that provides, great options in terms of getting to DC. In the city of Annapolis, we have the city is operating really good transportation. And I think a lot of what the city of Annapolis is doing could be expanded to the county. One of the things the county did that I think if we expand the routes was during COVID, transit on county bus routes became free. And I'm advocating that we keep county routes free, even though the pandemic is, I'm going to knock on wood, hopefully calming down. I'll never say end because I don't know that we're ever going to see that, but keeping transit free. I mean, the bulk of the funds for transit actually come from county dollars anyway, and not from fares. And it's usually the most vulnerable, people that don't have car, that can't afford a car, elderly people that no longer drive. Often non-fixed incomes are more vulnerable and less able to pay the fares of county transportation. So keeping that free, I think, really is a great way to encourage people to use it. But making development decisions, encouraging development in ways that make transit logical. If we use patterns that really just encourage sprawl, well, you're going to have a car to get from A to B, from point A to point B. So developing in a different way. So there's, density transit hubs where people can walk. Actually, we're getting one in the city of Annapolis that'll be, or actually it's outside the cities. It's in District 6, but not in the city limits of Annapolis, in a corner of the Annapolis Mall parking lot. That's going to be a wonderful hub for transit for the county. Little things like, I know one project that I've been working on in my district that the stars have aligned between the city, the state, and the county government is just improving intersections where bottlenecks happen. And in District 6, if you're familiar with the intersection of Forest Drive, Chinkopin Round Road, and Aris T. Allen, if you drive through that intersection at rush hour, you know that it needs help. And so we've got the stars aligned. We've got the partners at the federal level, or excuse me, well, actually, we'll get the partners at the federal level with those transportation dollars coming. But I meant to say the state level and the city level all working together. So that kind of coordination can really make a big difference too. Lastly, I'll just add that, transportation has a huge environmental impact, and we need to be wise about the direction that we're making or the decisions that we're making with respect to transportation in terms of its impact on the environment. The county is moving towards an electric fleet of vehicles, having more electric charging stations, so we can be, again, wiser about using the transportation resources that we have and make a smaller carbon footprint. So all of those things working together, creating better bike paths, better sidewalks, that actually are already encouraged in the Move Anne Arundel plan, which is part of the general development plan that we passed in 2021. We've got great plans laid out. Some of them are in motion and some of them will be in motion over the next 4 years.
Thank you. And Mr. Scambalone.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so we do have a transportation problem here in Anne Arundel County. A couple things we can do. I will say we have some buses here, but the buses run mostly empty right now anyway, so it doesn't seem like a good solution. I think we need to move to more market proven solutions, something like more like an Uber type thing, more intimate personal rides. And the Maryland Live example is also a great example of how businesses can help with this, and partnering with businesses is of course the best way to find innovative solutions that match people's needs directly. Another thing that will really help with the amount of people on the roads is allowing mixed zoning so that people don't have a really large commute to work if they can live next to the business. If it's not, especially if it's not a big business that causes pollution or anything, then you can easily walk there or walk downstairs to where you work, and then that gets people right off the road. So there's a lot of things we can do to solve the problem ourselves without being dependent on money from other levels of government, which is not some place I think we want to take the county. And we can partner with business and get people where they need to be without spending a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you. So we did have a few comments come into the chat, and wanted to just note that there was, in terms of the public transportation, connecting some of our community college and their annex offices, as well as noting some of the concerns, as well as individuals who are using things, ride shares like Lyft and Uber, how that impacts their finances, which is another issue we're going to touch on. There was also a question, so I want to ask this on follow-up of everybody, specifically about Route 3. And we know this is an issue in a lot of our different roadways, especially some of our pass-throughs through different counties. However, Route 3 in particular is an interesting setup, as we know, that there have been several accidents, some of them resulting in fatalities in the past couple of years. So for everybody, what is the plan or something that you think is going to be beneficial to increase and have more consistent police patrolling or other traffic measures to address this issue, so that rather than it being, an increased presence for maybe a few weeks or a few months, that there is something consistent in how we are transporting ourselves down 3 safely. And I will circle back to start with Mr. Dove.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity. Route 3 has been a problem for a while. I know there's been a petition ongoing to get that fixed. It's a state road. It's going to be a state problem. And I know there's dollars coming to help with that, but it's going to be a while. In the short term, it is going to be working with the police department to try to find ways to make sure they've got a bigger presence along that route. I think we've seen a little bit more of that, but you're correct. There's several accidents that occur both from speeding and for what I call those distracted drivers that are going through there. We have issues with people crossing the road in certain areas there where we're getting into accidents. It's going to be about presence with police for the short term, but I do know they're trying to work a plan to really, I guess, say modernize Route 3, but it's also a development problem. A lot of the stuff that's on Route 3 shouldn't be there. I mean, it's going to get more and more congested. So it's going to be an overall plan where the state's going to have to work with us. But right now it's going to be a state issue that we're going to have to partner with our delegates and try to get something done from the Maryland Department of Transportation.
Thank you. And I will also note that we recognize that Route 3 does not go through all of the county areas, but working together as a council, we are concerned kind of how, as a, having some input from each individual who would sit on that council. So I will move to Mr. Estep.
Well, as you know, 3 of us in the chat are running for the seat that has Route 3 running up and down it. So at least we've got a confluence there. I have a crazy idea, and it's not really crazy. I'm just going to use that term. Why don't we teach civility why don't we ask people to just be better? I mean, it isn't the hardest task in the world. I think you look at now and you look at what's happened over the last few years. I mean, why don't we just ask people to take a moment to recognize that if you get home at 5:03 instead of 5:01, it's not going to impact your life at all. And some people might get home safely. You know, there's simple things like that that we can do as human beings that don't require legislation or an act of Congress. Additionally, as Mr. Dove and I pointed out, the Route 3, of course, is a state highway issue. But for those of us who have had longstanding relationships with SHA and with MDOT, I think it is not the hardest lift to at least engage in conversations. As pointed out earlier, that $800,000 has already been invested. That's going to look at the northern part of Route 3 from that Rydell and Watchapel piece with the confusion and lights there, all the way up to just below 3 becomes 97. That should, with a lane expansion and things of that nature, help, at least as far as the traffic goes. We also just have to make sure that we are controlling how people get onto and off of Route 3 when they're exiting and entering. That's a more simple fix and coming off of actual local roads that we can address as a council in the future, as opposed to looking for state help. So, and my wife and 14-year-old are on a 14-month-old are driving up and down 3 every day coming from the hospital she works at in Clinton. So believe me, nobody wants it fixed more than I do.
Thank you. And I just switched off of my list. So, Ms. Hummer.
Yes. Well, as everyone is saying, it's kind of, this is a long-standing issue. Route 3 was designed to be more of a country road, and it wasn't supposed to allow the kind of development that has built up on both sides and down the median. Unfortunately, that horse is out of the barn. We're not going to do away with that, but Councilman Pruski has been working hard to bring attention to this at the state level. And the great news is on the infrastructure funding that's coming from the federal government, and it's being allocated to different projects around the state. One of those is Route 3. And so there will be the impetus there to really do a study and find some ways that we can alleviate, part of the accidents that happen there is just so congested. And so what are some ways we can work on the side roads to broaden things out, to give people some alternatives, to slow things down? It's not going to be an easy fix. I agree with James totally that let's be more patient with each other. But when there's that many cars on the road, we need to find ways to alleviate. As we talked earlier about transportation, one way we can do that is to find ways to have less cars on the road. Let's encourage more public transportation and things so that we can alleviate some of that. But this is going to be a big fix. It's going to take us all working together with the state and building on the relationships that we have with our state representatives to make sure that the funds come there and that we tackle that. Because like the Bay Bridge, those are 2 big projects that are going to take a lot of lifting and a lot of time. And the longer we wait to address it, the worse it's going to get and the longer it's going to take. So let's get moving now. We've got money from the feds. We've got lots of money. Let's dive in and take advantage of it and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I grew up in Calvert County, and if anyone's ever been down to Calvert County, you know that there's not much down there, and there was even less down there when I was a kid. So when we wanted to go anywhere, we would either go to Annapolis, Bowie, or Crofton. And I remember every time we would go to Bowie and Crofton, Route 3 was kind of a boring road. It's like motels, and there was a couple car dealerships and the Baystock Stadium. That's all I really remember. Now I go and I'm glad that all of my district is on, like, I don't actually have to get on Route 3 to get there, because every time I go on Route 3 now, I'm kind of nervous. There's just so much traffic, and there's people switching lanes, people getting on. So I understand that it's a problem. And specifically to the question, more of a police presence. I don't know, I have not studied how to fix the problem yet. So however we can do that in the short term, if that means working with police, I'm happy to support that initiative. I think that, obviously that means diverting police from other places or hiring more police, which comes with its whole, other set of baggage. So, but if that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do. And then just with what everybody else said, I mean, it's a problem. We have this money and we need to take advantage of that.
Thank you. Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you. So Route 3 does not come through District 6, although now it is very close to one of the boundaries of District 6 as it has its new boundaries. But I think a lot of my colleagues have mentioned, I think the best things that we have, the best paths we have for making improvements there. I work in Odenton, so I have to go that way quite often. So I'm pretty familiar with all the experiences that folks have mentioned about Route 3. But I think, the same kinds of things that we need everywhere. We need to increase transit. We need to take advantage of those federal dollars. We need to make good partners with our state and federal transportation, our partners, to leverage that to help us make improvements to Route 3. Maybe it's time for us to be looking at some limited access. As Sean mentioned, it used to be, and I think Ms. Hummer mentioned, it used to be, really just kind of a rural, windy road that was intended to be, not anything like what it is today. And so it's becoming something of a high-speed highway. And there's some intersections on Route 3 that have that sort of limited access feature the way, an interstate does, like actually Route 32, I believe. And Route 3 has that, it has ramps, and those tend to be the safer spots, but we still have lots of stoplights and strange left turns. Anything we can do to make those intersections safer, get cars off the road, find ways to improve transit. All of those things are going to be ways that we can, dig ourselves out of the Route 3 hole that's been dug over the last several decades.
Thank you, Mr. Niemeyer. I'm sorry, I am looking at the Mr. Scambalone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the Road 3 problem, a little south of District 2 kind of gets in the bottom of it. But yeah, so first off, I'd like to applaud Mr. Estep on his very libertarian idea of you don't need a law to solve every problem here. It's definitely something that we can do by talking to the community, getting people to be more polite on the road. A lot of things can be done with that, with not only encouraging the government, but non-government organizations. Due to the fact these are traffic accidents, I don't think increased police presence is going to do a lot. It doesn't seem very intuitive that it would. The long-term solution is sounds like redesigning the road to make it more modern for what it's used for. Again, it's a state road, so it's hard, but we can maybe do short-term solutions, better signage on the intersections that are a problem. Maybe we can get some ramps in there, but it's mostly going to be seeing what we can do to make the road safer in the place where the accidents happen a lot, and to just get people to to drive carefully, watch out for each other, and be aware of their citizens when they're driving around the road.
Thank you. And I do apologize. Again, I did skip Mr. Niemeyer.
I thought I was going to get a fun free pass on the District 4 issue. So, so really going back and looking at traffic engineering and everything for Route 3, yes, we got way ahead of ourselves. Jolie's very right. The horse is way out of the barn. We were very irresponsible in the manner in which we developed that entire corridor and didn't put the appropriate infrastructure in to have safe transit to handle the new homes, the new businesses and everything. But we can go back, we can look, and we can put active measures in place on top of more active patrolling, policing, and spot checking, making sure people aren't on cell phones and texting while they're driving and speeding down the road and general reckless driving. But there are a lot of active measures that can be put in place, metering, different lanes. Those left turn lanes are always great, roundabouts, things that are in place in a lot of places in the county and in the general area that don't exist on Route 3 that will all improve the safety of it. Again, that's a lot of pushing towards the state, and we feel the weight of the amount of money coming from the federal government through the Infrastructure Act on the construction side. And I guarantee you there are a lot of construction companies that are willing to come in there and fix that. But we have to make sure we on the government side don't hold up that process with too many issues along the way, and we go out there and act responsibly and quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to switch to our next topic area, and we are actually going to start with Mr. Scambolone. A related concern to the transportation issue is many individuals work here and live outside the county for multiple reasons. The housing market for both purchases and rentals has moved out of reach for many. How can the county government ensure housing affordability and reduce and prevent homelessness?
Yeah, so talking about zoning again seems to be a main topic here. We have economic development areas in Anne Arundel County, which is great. We should expand those and even reduce the regulations more, because the way to figure out what zoning best meets the needs of the community is to let people experiment, let people try what they want. And no one knows better than the individual for what works best for them. So people need to figure out what works, what doesn't, experiment. And so it's really just about reducing zoning, allowing people to build what needs to be built and where. And then if more houses means lower cost for houses, that's the main thing driving housing prices up. I mean, yeah, with population is going up too, but the regulations are really stopping people from building and building the kind of house that people want to live in or are able to afford to live in, because that's what people, if that's what people can afford, that's what builders are going to want to build so they can sell it. So it's mostly about reducing zoning regulations and letting people build what is needed where, and that's the kind of thing that you can't really predict from a central planning from a few people on a council. You can't have all information necessary to know what is the best place to build each individual structure. So that's where you get the free market and spontaneous order, and it really does work.
Thank you, Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you. This is definitely an issue that's absolutely an enormous issue for Anne Arundel County, and actually becoming more and more important around the state and across the country. I'm optimistic that some of the legislation that we've passed in the last few years will begin to have an impact, but large development takes time. And so it's hard for things to have an immediate impact. So I'll start with those longer term things that we've done over the past 4 years. We've passed legislation to make it easier to provide housing for elderly people of moderate means. We passed a workforce housing bill that allows higher density housing in area or in particular, working class folks, that missing middle that I saw, I don't know who it was, but I saw someone mention in the chat. We also passed a Fair Housing Act, which prevents discrimination in housing. And that can actually be a pretty substantial obstacle for people of color, people with disabilities, veterans, for getting the affordable housing that actually already exists, to make sure that that we're using putting to good use the affordable housing that's already out there. During the pandemic, we enacted some temporary rent controls to make sure that people weren't getting price gouged. We passed a resolution urging the state to extend the eviction moratorium. We've renewed several pilot programs, and that's payment in lieu of taxes for low-income housing. And some of the legislation that one of the pieces of legislation that I really like to pass before my term ends, before this first term ends, I hopefully that we'll have a second term, is legislation for accessory dwelling units. And that can really create more affordable housing very quickly. An accessory dwelling unit can be basically any sort of like a little mini, oh, sorry, I'm reading the chat. I can't read and talk at the same time. An accessory dwelling unit could be something like a little garage apartment that you already have, in a detached garage from your house. Our current law in Anne Arundel County is very restrictive. It is very limiting on the types of structures, the types of spaces that can be used for accessory dwellings. But a new law in places in other parts of the country that are experimenting with accessory dwelling units are allowing, for example, basement apartments. They're allowing things that sort of resemble tiny houses. Where you'd actually have a separate structure. And that can be great for intergenerational living. So, older older couple, their children have moved out, maybe want to downsize a little bit, could move into a smaller space and collect the rent of their, of the house that they lived in when they needed the more space with their family members. And all of a sudden you've got some more housing available, and everyone's mortgages, if you all of a sudden have someone helping you pay the mortgage because you're renting out part of your space, you can bring your housing costs down. So that's a piece of legislation that I'm hoping to introduce by this summer. Another one that actually a number of members of the council were working on early in 2020, which unfortunately got derailed by everything. All our attention was required for the COVID pandemic. And I think this will be something folks will be interested in taking up, is a moderately priced dwelling unit law that requires developers that, if they're creating a development of a certain size, to be sure that they are including some units that are available for people, sort of below market rates, maybe for folks that earn 60% of the median wage in the county. And so all of those things together, I think combined, this is not going to be a single strategy. It's going to take lots of different solutions, lots of different ideas. But I feel like we're on the right track. And I actually feel like we were quite stalled before 2018 in making any movement on affordable housing. I know the county executive has talked about a housing trust fund, and that's something that I would absolutely support, that could do things like improve, especially in the city of Annapolis. We have public housing that is getting renovated, but we also have a lot that needs to be renovated, just for the health and safety of the residents who live there. So things like that. I think we have a lot of good options. We just need to push them along, get them moving, and wait for some of these results, to start seeing the results of some of the legislation that's passed over the last few years.
Thank you. Mr. Niemeyer.
Thank you. So first off, we all have to acknowledge, and I think there's no doubt in it, that we have a supply and demand issue at hand, which is driving up the cost of housing. I've watched a house across the street from me sell for $616,000 that just 2 years ago sold for $490,000. And the last person to buy it bought it around $70,000. While it's wonderful for those of us that already own homes we've gotten exceptional equity, at least for the time being, in our homes, it drives people out of purchasing an affordable home in a nice neighborhood that they want to get to, and continues to push the divide across the middle, and makes that missing middle get bigger and bigger by the day. In the past, we just allowed contractors to overdevelop and focused on getting higher income people to move into the county, especially in District 5. And it was very, very successful, unfortunately, to get our area to become a more wealthy area that brought in higher priced homes with less land, while destroying our environment, destroying the green space that we have. It was quite frankly reckless and terrible for the future of the area. So what I think we need to do is incentivize redevelopment of existing properties around the county as well. We have a lot of areas where we've got, maybe not in District 5, but in districts outside, where we've got shopping malls that would be great, that are dilapidated or worn out, that would be great for mixed use, that would have an affordable housing piece of it. And then to prioritize our teachers. And we have teachers, especially in District 5, that can't afford to live here unless they've got a second income of their own, or from a spouse or a partner, or living with multiple people at home. That's just criminal that our teachers can't afford to live where they teach. This is a community that we're trying to build, and we're not even allowing the most key members of our community to live here, including first responders and some of our current residents. I have workers that work for me can't afford to live in Cape St. Clair sometimes, just because of the cost of housing. And we're not talking about people that are making $15 an hour. We're talking about people making $25, $30 an hour, still can't afford to live close to where they work, which goes back to transportation, increasing traffic on the roads, because they're going down further, making further and further trips to get to work, and taking up more space on the roads they shouldn't be. So what I'd like to see happen is that we continue to build the infrastructure of the future. And I'm glad Ms. Rodvian brought up the point of what was being worked on before 2020, because there is a lot of good that can be done, especially with multi-use housing and commercial development, that can have a affordable housing component to it. Now, I look down to, this one that really gets me, is to Beacon Square down in Annapolis. You pull up the developer's website on that one, and it is something in the neighborhood of 189, nearly 200, maybe it's more than 300, Class A luxury apartments being built in Annapolis, and 180 some of 55 plus, which I know was put in there just to get around our capacity issues in schools. And it was being touted as such a great project because it is being put near public transportation. But just being near public transportation isn't enough if people can't afford to live there to take the bus. The people that are going to live there are mostly going to be car owners, people that can afford to drive their car to one of our existing train and bus depots to get to DC, to get to Washington. It's not filling the need that we have. We need to incentivize to have affordable housing in those new projects. And the fact that we're building it and our tax dollars are going to flow right out of the area. There's no wage requirement as part of the job. We're going to have a lot of out-of-state contractors come in, build it. Actually, quite fortunate that Book Construction is one of the major builders because they are a union general contractor. They'll do better at keeping the dollars here. But you've got a huge multi-million-dollar development going on right here in the middle of our county, right by the state capitol, that is just going to miss the mark on so many different levels. And we on the county council side, I think there is a huge opportunity for us to take care of our zoning and take care of our permitting process so we can keep those things done that are done in this area to benefit the people that live here and to keep the dollars that we spend in our county. And I want to touch on one thing real quick, and that was what I heard earlier from Mr. Zambiglione from zoning. I think that's the wrong answer to open up the Wild West. We have a lot of zoning issues in Anne Arundel County, and I've seen them where we have R2 zonings, which are grandfathered into other uses, and it locks us in from, keeps us away from building what we need to build, whether it's commercial or residential in certain areas. The answer is not to just let people build what they want. We have to have a plan. The government has to step in to have a plan to control overdevelopment, or we will see just patchwork everything. This won't be an attractive place to live. This won't be a safe and good community to be a part of. But what we do need to do is take a step back and understand what the needs of the community are and rezone the area appropriately so that we get the growth that we need to get to the goals that we've put forth in our master plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston.
Yeah, so this issue is, I understand how important this issue is because I graduated in 2009. I graduated college in 2009 with a degree that wasn't all that useful for getting a job during the height of the recession. And it was hard to make it by for a few years there. And so I know how important this issue on a personal level, and I also see that it's an issue all around. I wanted to, what Councilwoman Ravian was saying about the laws that they passed to help with discrimination and to make more housing more available for people. I think that was really good, and I think that that's the right direction. We need to keep working towards that. And I was also going to say that I think that accessory dwelling units are something that we can explore in South County. I feel like that's normally thought of they've been thinking about a lot in Annapolis City. I think it's something that we can also think about in South County is because we have a lot more space. Of course, that comes with traffic issues that we'll have to work out as well. So we have to have a holistic approach of dealing with infrastructure and housing. I also wanted to, something that I forgot to mention with your first question about transportation, cross-county stuff. And this ties in with affordable housing in my district. So in District 7 in South County, we don't have that much affordable housing. The affordable housing that we do have is in Lothian, which is really far from Annapolis. And it's far from most things in our county. The closest urban center to Lothian is actually, it's Upper Marlboro, which is, it's in PG County. But we don't have any sort of transportation to get there and back. So I think that that's something we need to coordinate, and that dovetails with affordable housing, because if you have a house you can afford, or in this case, you're living in a trailer that you can afford, but you can't get to work, that's a problem. So I think that we really have to, transportation and housing, we really have to think about both of those things together. And I think that is all I'm going to say on that for now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Moving on to Ms. Hummer.
Yes. So the last data that I saw, the most recent data says there's a wait list of more than 21,000 people for affordable housing in Anne Arundel County. And we all know that the average rents have gone up over 20% in the past year, and home prices have gone up over 15%. So the need is there. I applaud Councilwoman Rodvian and her colleagues. They've really passed some really important legislation over the past couple of years, which we will see the benefits from, but it takes time. You know, you can't turn around tomorrow and suddenly have an affordable housing area, but you can open the valves so that there's more opportunity to do that, and it's coming. I attended last week a presentation on a really great looking project that's coming in the Seven Oaks area of District 4 called Blue Oaks. And the developer has worked with the federal government, the state programs and county programs to bring this plan in. And it's going to be 150 units at what was an unused boarded up commercial development. That's exactly the kind of redevelopment we want to see that meets that need to have in. And we need more projects like that. The legislation that the council passed in 2019 that gives a little more flexibility in the zoning and incentives for affordable housing projects, that's a great start. I think we need to build on that and go even further to look at changes in our zoning codes that it can allow more innovative and creative housing like accessory dwelling units. I attended the great presentation last week on the missing middle housing and talking about how we had much more flexibility and interesting housing before we enacted zoning laws back in the 20s. If you look at older neighborhoods like Annapolis, they're much more interesting with duplexes and townhouses and things, as opposed to the exact same ones. We've zoned ourselves out of a lot of the creativity that would meet that market of retirees, young families, singles, that we would have more things. So we could offer quadplexes and triplexes and duplexes, things that would be much more interesting instead of the exact same townhouse, single family homes that we're currently seeing. I would love to see us really look at a broad overhaul of our zoning and remove the barriers and the disincentives for quality, innovative housing to meet all income levels. I love the idea of requiring that a certain number be affordable units. At the Laurel Racetrack in District 4, on the Howard County side, they are in the midst of building a mixed-use community that really is a perfect model of missing middle housing that offers a variety of affordable units at different price points. That's right next to Anne Arundel County. We can model the same. There's things that we can bring in. Higher density, closer to transportation, so that it's more walkable communities and then we help lower income people be able to work and get to their jobs in affordable areas. So I think there's so many things that we can do for this. I think that the current administration, county executive and county council have taken some big steps toward that, and we need to build on that and continue on. One of the issues that was raised in the questions that hasn't really been addressed yet is how do we prevent some of the housing that comes through? Part of that is to make housing more affordable so that people aren't being evicted and losing. Last week, I sat down with a community activist, and we're working together to research different programs that are in place in different counties for some legislation directly targeted toward tenant landlord relations and how we can lift the quality of housing that's available and protect our tenants so that they aren't unfairly removed from their housing. And I think that those are important things we need to address, is to make sure that tenants are protected and that we are continuing the supports and groups we have to keep families and singles in their homes. So I look forward to expanding on what has already been done by the council and just moving forward with that.
Thank you. Mr. Eastep.
All right, thank you. I'm of a couple of minds on this one. I believe that we need to work with our county executive to make certain that we find pathways to create the right affordable housing. Ms. Hummer mentioned, and once again, in my community of Odenton, that the Blue Oaks piece will bring 150 units right there at 175 and Blue Water Boulevard there in Odenton, again, over boarded up retail. I think one of the areas that we have to be cognizant of and that we have to think about is, in fairness, if you look at the big picture, we don't know who's going to be sitting in the big seat come November. And I think we have to prepare ourselves to create an atmosphere of partnerships rather than telling everyone what we're going to do and how we're going to make it happen and scaring people off. I think we need to have an atmosphere that promotes partnerships. How do we find ways, as Ms. Radvian pointed out, they've done to incentivize developers to come in and want to be a part of the community? I don't know that we can simply say, well, this is the law and you follow it, or you won't get your pound of flesh. I don't believe that is always the path. I think there are ways that we can work it properly, but I think we also have to work with partners that want to be a part of this community, that want inputs. I think we have to work with communities that are interested in what's coming up in their area. And again, that's not, I saw the term NIMBY. It's not, it's about being partners.
Okay, we will expect Mr. Eastep to join us again and move on to Mr. Dove.
Okay, as I look at this, Ms. Radvian really hit the nail on the head. Everything's already been done at the council and also by the county executive. So I really want to expound on that. What I will say is some of the things that some of the neighborhoods we do have right now need redevelopment. There are in certain areas of our district, there's housing that could be better utilized for middle income, but they're in disrepair. They need certain funds. I know the county executive is working on that. I've talked to certain areas of his team, and they're trying to make those funds that we currently got, all those dollars we got from the federal government, to help rebuild some of those dilapidated units, make those available for folks in the middle income and lower income levels. Some of those are owned by private homeowners. We've got to come up with a process so that if they take that money, then they have to provide lower income housing, or they have to provide middle income housing for our residents. So just another idea. I know they're working to try to figure out the best way to utilize that, but those funds are available currently, and they're going to try to work to put those into those housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving to our next question, in hopes again that Mr. Eastep can get back in. Another issue that is under discussion is around the education of our youth. We all want equitable access to high quality education that affirms who children are and can become as they mature. What proposals would you introduce to protect youth across diverse backgrounds, beliefs, and abilities? And I will again start this time with Mr. Scambalone.
Oh yeah, thank you. This is probably the biggest issue I'm running on, which is a school choice program, because the best thing to help the students is to allow parents to choose a school that meets their students' needs the best. They know what's best for a student. They know what environment they excel in best, and what curriculum they need, or well, at least what curriculum is compatible with what their beliefs are. Some people want different things, and we need to have a marketplace of ideas for what curriculum works best. If people try different things, and the schools that do well will succeed, and the schools that don't will not. And that's the best way to get the best education. And so to move forward with that, I would propose a voucher program to allow people, because right now only the elite can afford private schools, and that's a problem. We need to open the choice that the elite have to everyone, including the historically disadvantaged communities. And the way we do that is by having a voucher program so that the tax dollars are already being utilized per student can follow a student to the school they want to go to. The county does about $10,000 per student to the school system. If we let them take just that $10,000 to where they want to go, they could afford pretty much any private school in the area, and more would pop up. And the per student funding of the education system would actually increase if people take advantage of that, since they also get state funding as well. So that is definitely the best way to open up opportunities for people, get people into better education, improve our schools through competition and free market, trying out what's best and what works and what doesn't work. And then you also lose all these these big PTA fights about mask mandates, for example. And people, if there's a lot of people who want masks, they can go to a school that has masks, and people who don't can go to a school that doesn't require it. And people can, based on their own circumstances, can pick the school that works for their circumstances and their needs and their risks that they're willing to take. And that's how we work together and live in a community together, is by letting people live the way they want, instead of having these one size fits all solutions that come from the top, and it forces people to fight each other. Because if you put that much into the decision of who's in power, then and of course people are going to fight it. Of course people are going to have these giant PTA battles when there's just one solution for everyone and you have no choice. So that's really the best way to improve our community, improve our education, and really just get new ideas out there and improve student education and fast rates. And a lot of Anne Arundel schools are not terrible, but a lot of public schools, I mean, the reason the elite who can do it go to private school is because they are better, and that's the kind of choice and opportunity we want to give to everyone. So that's the best thing for education. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you. I'm going to push back really, really hard on Mr. Scamballone's wish for school choice. School choice is absolutely a way to just drive a wedge between the most vulnerable and those who are in the middle class or the upper class. Our private schools are not required to accept students with disabilities. Our students are not required to accept students with behavioral problems. They are allowed to kick out students with behavioral problems. They do not have to accept English language learners. And so if we allow our tax dollars to just go to public school, or to private schools with vouchers or through school choice programs that aren't mentioned or that aren't very carefully monitored, we are going to destroy our public schools. And our public schools are actually in pretty harsh condition as it is. As many of you, well, I think I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm a public school teacher. And right now our biggest problem is we are understaffed. Our students are really struggling with mental health issues. They were struggling with mental health issues before the pandemic. And they have unfortunately only gotten worse. We need to figure out a way to encourage more people to go into the teaching profession because we're struggling to recruit. We do not graduate enough graduates from our teacher education programs to staff public schools, much less private schools. And the private school pay in our area is usually lower than public school pay. But our public school pay until very recently was lower than every single surrounding county. So we absolutely need to continue to invest in our teachers, invest in and support efforts at the state to encourage more people to go into teaching. It's been such a disrespected profession that I have seen more colleagues leave over the last 10, 12 years because they just feel like they're not appreciated, they're overworked and underpaid. And we have to if we want to support our students, we have to make sure that we have teachers in place, and if we want them to stay, we have to support them. So you know, I said at the beginning, this is one of the reasons that I got into this race. You know, we've been successful in improving our teacher pay. The state law, the Blueprint for Public Education, is going to push counties even harder and give support from the state level for funding. I believe we hopefully have gotten to the point we have stopped bleeding teachers. You know, we're not losing teachers. Well, hopefully we'll stop losing. I think the we're also at a phase where a lot of our baby boomer teachers are eligible for retirement, and the pandemic has created health concerns that said, you know what, I'm going to take that retirement eligibility and I'm going to walk out. So we have to find a way to to improve our recruiting efforts. We've got to provide more supports for mental health. I cannot tell you how critical that situation is for our young people right now. It is absolutely the worst I've seen in 15 years of teaching. We need to support, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to go. Obviously, we have, current issues with transportation, that students are having even difficulty accessing public schools because of transportation. And I will say in 2019, well before the pandemic, I knew that there were troubles on the horizon. We already had some areas where we had serious overcrowding on buses, and we needed to make some steps. So I encouraged additional funding. I encouraged for transportation in particular before the pandemic. I supported our Board of Education to hire an outside consultant to look at the transportation, and we will be seeing the fruits of some of that labor starting this fall. We've made some good strides in replacing old buildings, like, thank goodness, Old Mill Middle North, Old Mill Middle South, and Old Mill High School are now in the process of being replaced. We got Crofton High School open. We've got additions in a lot of schools that needed them. I think I could sit here and talk all day, because this is obviously an issue I'm very passionate about. It's been my life's career. Even before I was a teacher, I worked in education law. So I think I'll just say we have to support our vulnerable students. We have to make sure our students with special needs are supported. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to put all of our efforts behind this before our public schools collapse.
Thank you, Mr. Niemeyer.
Thank you. It's going to take a true effort to follow that one. There is nobody with more passion than Lisa on this education issue. So thank you. Well, maybe Julie. So I want to get one topic that I didn't really hear, maybe I missed it, that I find to be one of the more pressing issues, right? Our schools are the biggest feeder of our community, the educating of our children. There should be complete equity across the board on how much we're funding for students, no matter what part of the county you live in. I came from a place in Pittsburgh where all of our schools were not by county, they were by community. And I believe, if it's still the same, I was in the biggest disparity of wealth equity in the country where I went to school. I lived in a place that was, 98.5% white, and was one of the wealthier areas, where we had Pleasant Hills, Jefferson Hills, and West Elizabeth. And we had all the money in the world from all the tax dollars you could possibly get from the community, and everything you could need short of a pool at our high school. Next door was Clairton. Clairton is a run-down old steel town. Once upon a time, a stronghold of the city of Pittsburgh. One of my uncles grew up there, and it lost everything. And it was the complete opposite demographic down there. You walked into their schools and it was criminal. It was like walking into an abandoned house. They didn't get anywhere near, because they couldn't afford it. There was no extra funding. The funding coming from the state was very little. It makes me very happy to live in a state where we can actually have equality across the county. And it makes me feel terrible when we don't push for that equality to happen within the county. Right? It is a huge piece of community to have wealthier areas be able to take those tax dollars and spread it across to the less wealthy areas, so that there is at least a chance for equity across our education. So I want to go to one specific topic, though, that wasn't covered, and it was support workers. And I found, going through my education on the blueprint for education, the most criminal part was the fact that we aren't funding our support workers. And we talk about how necessary it is for mental health, and how necessary it is for special education teachers and the support workers that go along with it. And the fact that that was in whole ignored to get their pay up so we can get more of them to support our teachers is just something that absolutely needs to be addressed. And whether that's done through better collective bargaining, whether that's done through changes to the blueprint, whether that's done by additional funding from the county level so we can afford the best workers. That is a critical need that I see to make our schools what we all talk about that we want them to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Niemeyer. Moving to Mr. Livingston.
Schools. Schools are really important. My parents were both public school teachers. I'm who I am today because I'm a product of public school teachers. And one of the things I think about with schools is our county budget, the majority of our budget is put towards schools. And that's often why people are uncomfortable with our school system. Like, oh, all that money goes to school, it's not well managed. But there's a reason that all that money goes to schools. And it's because it's one of our largest employers in the county. It's supporting hundreds of teachers and their families, and thousands of children, as Carl was saying, that are brought up and eventually have an economic impact on our county. And instead of talking about how important that is, lately, all we're talking about is these like culture war issues. So I think part of what we need to do is we need to shift the dialogue. We need to change what we're talking about to the absolute gigantic, impact and the foundation that school is on our county. I'm tired of I'm tired of hearing about, taking the focus off of our students and our teachers and putting it on ideas that, that some people seem to think is happening in schools. You guys know what I'm talking about. So, so I think part of it is shifting the dialogue. And then, transportation, obviously, that's a big thing with all the school bus issues. And as far as what Carl was saying, like I'm totally on board with making sure that, that like this is the reason that we have school systems, so that everything is spread out, so that every student has an equal chance. And the idea of a school vouchers, it's like, all right, we take that money away from the schools, and then we're not supporting those teachers and families anymore. So it just I can't make sense of that idea. I work at a private school. I didn't mention that earlier. So, there's a part of me that gets it. It's like, oh yeah, that would be nice, but I just don't see how it works economically. And ultimately it detracts from everyone in the school system. So, so I think everybody has done a great job. And I think we need to talk about, I just think we need to talk about the issues that matter more, that are impacting our teachers and our students.
Thank you. Ms. Hummer.
There we go. I just, as a fellow former public school teacher, I want to echo everything that Ms. Rodvian said. That when I hear talk of vouchers, it just raises my hackles, because I worked with special education children, the most vulnerable children we have, and the majority of private schools would not accept the students that I taught. They would be left out. My children have gone to 8 different schools in the county. I probably have a broader range of education experience than any other parent in this county. They've gone to 8 different ones, 3 different high schools, and the 3 high schools they've attended are the most diverse and labeled the most challenged high schools. However, we chose for them to go there because we knew the great enrichment, the wonderful programs they had, but also that they were going to be around children from every ethnicity, every racial background, every economic level. And it's giving them such a wonderful picture of the world and how we all work together. And so I'm a big believer that when I look at many of their classmates who are English language learners or who are extremely challenged, low income kids, many private schools wouldn't take them. But yet I see every day the amazing work that our schools and our teachers are doing with those children. So I'm going to always advocate for that. I think we kind of got away from what the original question was, which was how we could build in, more acceptance and talking with the kids. I can't even remember the exact words of the question now, but one thing I want to highlight that we did when I was on the Board of Education is that we passed making it a graduation requirement that all ninth graders must take the Global Community Citizenship class. And this is a class that teaches children to engage in conversations in a civil manner and to try to understand other points of view and to discuss without being nasty. Unfortunately, our kids don't have that model anymore. They're not seeing that in the public square from adults, but this class is building on that. It is breaking down barriers. It's having children look at their own personal biases of how they were raised and what they may have, to really engage in looking at different viewpoints and studying. And I think this is a huge benefit that will happen to our kids. I look forward to seeing it over the coming years as more and more of our students take that class, if we will help change the discourse that's in the environment. Now, County Council will not have any control of that. County Council doesn't decide the curriculum, doesn't put out the plans, but what County Council can do is adequately fund our schools so that those things can take place. If the County Council and the County Executive do not provide the needed funds, we can't hire the great teachers that will lead classes like that. We can't hire the great teachers who are going to be providing the speech and language and mental health supports that our kids need. We've got to fully fund. I served on the school board. The majority of the time I was there was a Republican county executive and a Republican-led council. And I can say it was extremely challenging to get the funds we needed for schools. And that was my biggest frustration when I was on the Board of Ed, is that we would ask for things we knew we needed to serve our children, but we were never funded the amount to actually meet those needs. And we had to make painful decisions every year not to do certain things that we knew should be happening. The past couple of years have seen a great improvement in that. And we've got to continue that. We've got to continue funding it so that we can serve and that we can continue this. That there are many issues in this county and throughout this country about people being bigoted and racist and uncivil to each other. And the schools can't solve that. But the reality is the schools have more programs trying to address that and teaching our kids than any other organization that's out there. Every day, our schools are providing lessons to children about dealing with their mental health and addressing with other kids. We've got to keep funding that if we want to see our discourse get better. When I see some people talking on national television, I'm like, where were you in school? What were you taught that you feel it's okay to speak like that? And so we have an obligation to try to make our schools a place that is slowly changing that. We can't solve everything because we all know what they're hearing at home, but at school, we need to make it a place where kids realize that all children are accepted and loved and respected for who they are. So there, I'll get down off my soapbox.
Thank you. And because I know Mr. Estep got disconnected, I will re-ask the question at this point. That in terms of equitable access to a high quality education, what proposals would you introduce to protect youth across diverse backgrounds, beliefs, and abilities?
Okay, that's a great question. I don't think I've heard anyone answer it, but I do like it. I will back up for a moment. I do want to say that something I'd wanted to say, and County Executive Pittman had mentioned this regarding affordable housing for what I consider an incredibly vulnerable population is our veterans. For the new Crownsville, or for the eventually new Crownsville Hospital property, County Executive Pittman had mentioned that he wanted to include a veteran housing aspect to that project. So I think that's something that's important and that we should support when the opportunity presents itself. Regarding education, there's a couple prongs I want to take with this. My in-laws, 4 of them are educators in Germany. I think one of the things that we, again, tend to forget while we're while we're doing legislative things and while we're writing things into law, is how we treat people matters. We need to recognize that teachers are an essential part of our community, as essential as any of the frontline folks, as essential as our health workers. And we need to treat them with the respect and practically reverence that they receive in Germany for their positions. It's amazing watching the way people are treated there versus the stigma with having a position of teacher here. It doesn't make sense to me. And I think that's a question that falls upon us to educate the people in our districts. How do we tell them what these folks mean to us that are literally helping us bring up our children? I think it needs to start with something as simple as that, so that we really have an understanding of the work that folks do for 6.5 hours or more every day, helping to raise our children with us. I mean, Julie mentioned her struggles there, or not struggles, but all the time that she spent in the school system and that her kids have spent there. And I will have 5 kids that will have gone through this system when my 14-month-old eventually hits it. I've got nothing but pride in the work that the folks here do. I would say regarding education, I think how we begin to bring about equity is we have to understand that education does not begin when a child walks into kindergarten. We have to do a far better job of making sure that children do not fall through the cracks before they reach elementary school. That is our responsibility as parents, as members of a community, as potentially elected members of a council. We have to make certain that programs exist to take care of children long before they ever walk through the doors of an elementary school. I think it's essential that we make certain that we provide better access, whether it's transportation, whether it's assistance, getting young children to our libraries. As a trustee on the library board here in the county, I can't tell you the myriad number of programs that have just originated in the last few years that have made certain that we're going to teach diversity, we're going to teach inclusion, and we're going to show people that where you come from does not in any way determine who you become. I think these are important. I think it starts well before we enter schools. And I think as parents, we have to do a better job. I mean, I grew up in Prince George's County. I got a chance to see diversity that a lot of folks in Anne Arundel County just don't know. And I think all we have to do is raise our children properly and teach them, you know what, every single life is of value, and every single person here may come from different circumstances, but they're human. Have a conversation, get to know people, be better. What I would say also is, as a one-time performer, STEAM is essential. I think when we involve the arts in our curriculum, and again, as Julie points out, this is not a county council thing, but I think it's something we can promote. How do we promote STEAM? How do we get the arts in our schools? How do we begin them earlier than when they are now? Getting kids working together, not just solving problems, but having fun, performing, music, the real connectors that we have in life. I think it matters. Lastly, and I thank you, Ms. Clark, obviously you read my notes as you were commenting, partnerships. I mean, what I have seen in almost 2 decades in working in Prince George's County with the school system there with Dr. Goldson, Dr. Height, of course, who many of you know, not Dr. Height, I'm sorry, Kevin Maxwell from his time here with Anne Arundel County, and then Dr. Height before that, is partnerships work. You involve businesses, you bring them onto your campuses, you invite them in and you say, you know what, this is where we are, and we know that you're employing our future here in this county. How do we get you involved? I think you'll find that businesses want to be partners. They're not trying to just, add to their wallets. They want to be partners in the communities that they're involved in. Bring them on board, say, these are our needs. This is how you can help us. So not only are you bringing them their future workforce, you could look at internships. You could look at all sorts of ways to partner with businesses, and you can get them to invest, whether it's adopting a school, spending some of their money to enrich the lives of the people around them. It's how we start. It's not all the answers. And again, it's going to take working with the school board, but I think that we can do better than what we do. And I think a lot of it starts with us and recognizing the value of everybody, and that your zip code doesn't mean anything except that's where you live. It isn't a determinant on who you are or what you're going to be in life. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Dove.
Last but not least, first off, going to protecting students. There's a lot of funding for equity training and other education within the school system. We've got to make sure that piece is actually getting to the teachers and the principals. I believe a lot of the situations that are going on from a race perspective, sexual orientation perspective, we're training our students, but we also got to make sure that we're actually enforcing those things. So from a principal and assistant principal perspective, we got to make sure that the education is actually filtering down to the student, that we're actually holding people accountable when those situations occur, that they're coming out in the open. We're actually having those conversations. I know several schools have had some problems with that. I'm hoping that the principals are holding people accountable, and they're holding themselves accountable for those situations when they occur. With regards to police resource officers, I know we need those folks in the school. They've got to be there. We've got to have them. In protecting students, we've also got to make sure that those resource officers are properly trained, that different organizations are involved to make sure that they actually know how to handle students of color, situations that arise, that they also handle students of non-color. How do you handle different situations and approach it in the correct way? We've got to make sure that piece is built in. When you're talking about overall protection of students, that goes back to what we talked about with regards to teachers and having enough teachers there. Beginning of the conversation, we talked about marketplace. The marketplace can dictate what happens. Well, the marketplace has dictated. We've had more teachers leaving the profession because we're not doing the things to make sure they've got the right pay, enough pay, and they've got enough other teachers around them. If they're short-staffed, they don't have the mental health teachers that they need. They don't have the requisite transportation for their students. If we don't provide those things in the budget and then work with the school board to make sure they're spent in the proper way, then all of that makes for different problems. So the teacher piece is a big part of protecting the students as much as the other pieces of it are overall. With regards to what we can do on the council, we talked about the funding piece, but I just want to emphasize that pre-K through 5th grade funding is going to be so vital in making sure that that is what we do to get our students off in the right direction. If we get past 5th grade and those students do not have the resources that they need, do not have the basic math, basic reading, then we've got serious problems going forward. We know how hard it is from 6th to 8th grade, and then definitely getting into high school. If the folks are not on the right track, it's just doubly hard to pull them back. Once you zone out, once you don't know something, it becomes almost impossible to bring people back. So we've got to make sure we're really emphasizing that with the blueprint. And then we've got the other items that are in there. We've got to make sure that we fully fund it. I think that's going to be the #1 priority as we go forward from a budget perspective. I know we got public safety, we've got other things that we've got to be a part of, but we've got to make sure that we've got the funding in the school system. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Can I jump in, say something else?
Go for it.
Great. Sorry, I got myself all worked up by the school choice thing and forgot to say a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is I think that the Maryland blueprint is something that John was just talking about, but that's something that we really have to make sure that we're implementing in Anne Arundel County, that we're making sure that funding gets in place. Something that comes to mind is community schools, which is going to be a big part of that, which is going to help to bring equity among different areas, not just for the students, but for their whole families. And I also wanted to mention, and most of you, if not all of you already know this, but Maryland is is the first state on the East Coast that is majority BIPOC. And our education system obviously was developed not with that in mind. And I think that we need to look at the way our curriculum is and figure out how we can make sure that it's relevant and applicable and meaningful for everyone that's being taught, regardless of their race. So something we need to think about. And again, just shifting the dialogue and talking about things like that. And thanks for letting me jump in again.
Thank you. So we are moving into our final question, and I'm going to be a little out of order because I'm going to ask that Ms. Radvian go last. That this is about the Police Accountability Board. The current county council has introduced an ordinance establishing a board for police accountability. And this is a multi-question question, so I will ask it slowly and I will ask it twice. How do you see the relationship of this new board to your position on the county council? What scope would you include for the board if not already proposed? And how do you anticipate utilizing the board's reports? So again, that first part, how do you see the relationship of this new police accountability board to your role? What scope would you include for the board if not already proposed? And how do you anticipate utilizing the board's reports? And again, because Ms. Radbian is currently sitting on the county council and introduce the legislation, I am going to ask her to kind of give our final answer. So I will start. I'm going to start at the beginning again with Mr. Dove.
I thought I was at the back of the line. Next to it, relationship wise, I think it's vitally important. If anybody's been watching the council hearings that have been going on, it is vitally important. The relationship with the council to the Police Accountability Board and what's going on is super important because they set the actual tone of what's going to happen with that board. They're going to set the parameters on whether it's truly an independent police accountability board that can actually discern whether right or wrong has been done and whether there's actually a recommendation on punishment. So I think it's vitally important that relationship. From a scope perspective, as you look at everything that's going on, it's a question of whether the board can truly be independent, whether they can have the independent investigation powers, whether that can actually happen. I know the council has been challenged with getting the actual true discernment from different lawyers. Different lawyers having different opinions. My hope and goal is that it would actually have independent investigation powers, whether that comes this year, which we hope it does happen this year, or whether that comes next year through the House of Delegates making a change and making that clear in their legislation. But I believe that it needs to be have that independent authority to do the investigation and then also make that recommendation going forward. From board reports, how they be used, I think that's a matter for the council to discuss how that be used, but I think they need to be reviewed by the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eastep.
You're on mute, James.
Okay, with the in and out technology. This is a great question. And I think it's one that I'm sure Ms. Radbian is aware takes significant time to really give the proper answer. For me, it's a perspective issue. I think we all, whether we're on the council or whether we're a duly deputized officer of the law or we're a community that's suffered an action, we all have our own perspectives. And I think in the passion of whatever those perspectives are, we might lose the big picture and the actual perspective that matters. I don't believe, again, that we can do this on an island. I believe that you have to have conversations of significance with the invested parties. I think you need to have representatives of local government sitting down with representatives of law enforcement, sitting down with affected communities. I don't believe that either side can make the right decision without knowing the other's perspective, truly, genuinely knowing it. You know, and it can't be done. It can't be done because you're seeking retribution from one side, and it can't be done because it's always been done this way on the other side. You need to have a real dialogue and see why it is that people feel the way they feel. And you need to have a real dialogue so that others will understand law enforcement's perspective. What is it that they are, that have become their traditions, and why? Are we all ready to simply say it's our way or in the highway? No, I mean, we can't. We have to get together and say, what is the best way we can do this going forward? I mean, it's simple. You look at the days of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. They didn't agree on anything. But you know what? They came together. Each side got a win, each side got a loss, but we made things happen as a nation. I don't believe that we can go with one side or the other. There isn't one party whose take matters more than the other. We've got to come together on this. We've got to come together as a council. We've got to come together as a police force. We've got to come together as a community that's been affected by literally illegal acts taking place in their backyards. We have to come together to find out what the best idea is. I don't know that anybody sitting in any chair at this point alone knows what the right answer is. We know what the state has said, and there's significant leeway in what can be done, but we need to work together to find the answer. And I don't think we're doing it at this point. It certainly doesn't feel like the community and law enforcement are communicating well enough. And we need to make that happen before we can make a determination on what the best path is. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hummer.
Yes, I've been following the criminal justice reform bills through the state legislature and the county over the past couple of years. And this is really landmark legislation that's going to first time really allow citizen input when we look at police misconduct. It's a huge step forward for additional oversight, and I applaud the legislature for making these sweeping changes. However, as I experienced many times on the Board of Education, the first iteration of legislation often needs to be tweaked and clarified and expanded after it actually goes into effect, as we learn what actually works. And it's evident that that needs to be done with this legislation as well, because there's a lot of conflicting interpretations of what's happening. So I'm going to be studying the legislation that when it passes the county council this month, and really talking with the community and law enforcement and our state legislators so that I can advocate for the changes that we need moving forward to make sure it accurately reflects the intent of the legislators and also the wants of the community. We've got to find that connection in there. It's the county council plays a crucial role in this, in setting it up and establishing these, as I said, really historic new guidelines that are out there. And they need to, I've seen them working. I've been watching, I think we're going on meeting number 4, and they are working hard to try to get this right based on what they have right now. But I think that everyone on every side of this will agree that more clarification is needed from the state in order to make sure that things can be on there. I believe that the scope, I tend to think that the legislature intended for the scope to be larger than what is currently being talked about. But again, as I heard last week, they're looking for an attorney general perspective on that maybe can open that up to some greater things. And so the board will need to keep working on this. This is one that I anticipate will be put in place, but whoever of us are elected in the fall, we will certainly be revisiting this legislation. It will be coming through. And again, much like the Blueprint for Education that we all agree was a historic and landmark event, it's not perfect and it needs some tweaking there as well. And I think that this will be the same thing. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this great steps moving forward. And I hope that we will be able in the future to incorporate more of the community's concerns and their wish list of what this will include so that we can really make the changes that people have been seeking.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston.
Yeah, so I've been to a few of the council meetings over the last few weeks, and it's been pretty intense. Personally, I'm a young guy, and that influences. I think that influences my perspective on police accountability. Just the way that I view the world and the way that I interact with the internet. The brutality that we've seen across the nation from police over the last few years has been really, really tough for me personally to stomach. We've seen how unchecked power can result in violence. And so I think I very much am in support of the accountability board. And I think that we have to have a public view into the process of, everything related to police, really, from training to discipline. I was disappointed, or I've been disappointed that some of the amendments that have been proposed have not been passed. There were a lot of them, so I'm not super familiar with all of them, but there are a few that I wish had gone through. The more transparent the internal police disciplinary system is, and the more representation we have from our affected communities from the police brutality on the accountability board, the better it's going to be for all of us. So to your questions in particular, how do you see the relationship of the board? How do I see our relationship with the board? Well, just going to like what the board is, Julie was kind of alluding to this. She said, you know, I think that the scope was supposed to be a little bit larger, but we'll have the Attorney General weigh in on that. It's kind of confusing, right? Like going to these meetings and hearing questions get asked and be like, okay, so what is this? What is this board really? And it seems like at this point, all the board is to be able to report on disciplinary stuff, and they don't really have much of a role. So with what the scope of the board is now, I see us taking that information and then making sure that, you know, the systems that need to be in place in our police system are there. And as far as what scope that I think needs to be more implemented or needs to be implemented, what additional scope? Yeah, I don't know. I tend to think that it maybe should be larger. But again, I have not been steeped in the in that conversation. So that'd be where I would what I think it should probably be a little larger. And as we continue to discuss this over the years, I hope that we can really hammer down what that role should be, and then what our role should be with that information.
Thank you, Mr. Niemeyer.
Thank you. So first off, I'm very much in support of law enforcement. The job that they have protecting our communities and keeping us safe has got to be one of the hardest, most challenging things to deal with for anybody. I mean, I've been through escalation of force training. I've been faced with the need to hold a gun and potentially defend myself and protect others being in the military. This is not an easy thing that they do every day. We're also very fortunate here in Anne Arundel County that we don't physically deal with the issues we've seen across the country with the police brutality at the level we've seen it in places like Kenosha, Washington, and out on the West Coast. We have such a great opportunity here with this landmark legislation to implement something and work on it and tweak it and get it right that can be used across the country so that we can use this area as the model for the rest of the world. We know that the two most important things that we have to deal with law enforcement is that we're supporting the civil rights of our citizens at the same time as supporting public safety. Both of those things have to be treated equally. And that's where this independent board is so important. What Mr. Dove said about the independence is the most critical piece of this board's relationship with the county council. We don't know everything. And when we get two sides of a situation, we have to have an independent board be able to look at it and adjudicate it and bring us what the issues are, so that not only can we solve the problem at hand, that we can make our police officers recruiting and training better so we can prevent issues from happening in the future. We can make a better police force that is better respecting of everyone's civil rights. There shouldn't be a look in the eye of a police officer that would ever think that just because somebody is of a different color, a different race, a different nationality, that they should be treated differently or as a different threat. The threat is whether they're holding a gun or whether they're holding or they're doing something illegal, whether not what color they are. So when it comes to using reports, I think that's going to be the most vital thing to feed into, so we can have effective, clear discussions and communications with the Police Accountability Board, so we can both not narrow down, both get their scope right and have constructive conversations with them as it goes forward. So we're not just hearing an issue without any information. And as for what scope I would include, the scope that's there very much so has lots of tweaks that have to be done as we go through time and get it right. I'm looking forward to talking to a lot of you and a lot of the concerned citizens to understand what scope might be missing, what scope might be overreach to get the right board in place. So we can, as Stephen Waddy just said in the chat, get the right funding in place, especially when it comes to training, to getting the right training and equipment so that they can actually be an effective and respectful police force. So, but outside of that, that whole thing is how do we reduce crime so that our police force is able to have a more peaceful environment and have a better place. And in my mind, the most important thing is the most effective deterrent to crime is opportunity. And that comes from supporting our businesses and supporting our teachers and getting children brought up in a safe, equal community so that they're able to leave the school system feeling safe, wanting to be here and feeling like they're going to have a good, fulfilling job so that they can, so trouble doesn't get a chance to take place. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, it looks like we lost Mr. Scambolone, so I will jump then to Ms. Rodvian as the current incumbent on the council, but also as a candidate for seeking a second term to discuss the Police Accountability Board.
Thank you. Before I start, I realized I got so distracted by the school choice issue and the education question that I never really answered the question. So I want to make sure that I do better this time. Could you please repeat the question? Because I know there were 3 parts to it and I want to make sure I'm answering them.
I can. How do you see the relationship of this new Police Accountability Board to your office, to the County Council? What scope would you include for the board if not already proposed? And how do you anticipate utilizing the board's reports?
All right, sorry, I'm just jotting them down so I get them clearly. Okay, so first off, I think that the Police Accountability Board actually should be pretty independent from the County Council. We want to make sure that the Police Accountability Board does not become any sort of political football. So to the extent possible, we want to, keep it, not necessarily have Democratic members and Republican members. We want to have members that have experience, a breadth of experience that don't necessarily fall into any partisan category, which I think can, happen if the council is too closely involved. Now, that said, there does obviously need to be some oversight of the board to make sure that they're operating in a fair manner. They're following their own rules. They've got effective leadership. So I would say maybe the relationship to the County Council would be a little bit of an arm's length, but also with a watchful eye. With respect to the scope of the board, one of the things that I've been advocating as this bill has come before the County Council is to give the Police Accountability Board itself independence. This has been one of the biggest asks from the coalition, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a coalition of groups that are advocating for police accountability in Anne Arundel County. And I think they're right. I think that in order for there really to be trust in the outcome of any sort of review that this Police Accountability Board completes, there needs to be real independence. And unfortunately, the way the state law appears to be structured and the way my colleagues have interpreted the state law is generally that the Police Accountability Board itself just receives a complaint of misconduct and passes that complaint on to the law enforcement agency, and that law enforcement agency conducts its own internal review. After that internal review takes place, it is handed off to a 3-person entity called an administrative charging committee that reviews the file, reviews the work of the internal audit that police or that law enforcement agency conducted. I would prefer a system where the Police Accountability Board, or whatever you want to call it, is actually conducting its own independent investigation. It's not merely reviewing an investigation that has been completed by the law enforcement agency itself. I think that, things are going to be, things can be interpreted, details and facts can be interpreted very differently depending on your point of view. And if you have, an internal review, you're obviously, that's made up of folks in law enforcement, you're going to have a heavy weight on that point of view. I'd like to see something with more independence. And sufficient power to actually, conduct a meaningful investigation, not just to have subpoena power and to have, the ability to interview individuals who might be involved. And yes, I see Sean is mentioning funding, and absolutely that kind of work, it can't be done. Real investigation can't be done without some resources. So that's one thing that I would like to see, that unfortunately I'm not really convinced that this bill is going to have. And honestly, I think that kind of independence benefits the police in the long run. One of the things that I think the police are really struggling with right now is that the community does not trust them. There are large segments of the community that do not trust police. And if there is transparency and independence in a body that oversees the police, and that body says, hey, there was no misconduct here, or yes, there was misconduct here, but it's really independent from the police, that's actually going to do more to increase trust than an internal review process would. And I think that trust is what will help, encourage a better conversation about police. One of the things I've heard from police officers in this conversation is similar to what I hear from teachers, is that they just feel beaten down. They're not respected by the public. And I think that respect can come when the trust is more complete. And in our police department, not just in Anne Arundel County, but statewide, nationwide, recruiting police is becoming more difficult because that lack of respect. So I actually believe that a real independent board could help build that trust that will help restore that respect that I think, the police have come to expect. Then in terms of the use of the reports that come to the Police Accountability Board, well, I feel like the state law actually gave, pretty clear directions on what the council should do with those reports. They're one, supposed to get them and review them, and then make recommendations. Okay, what here went well? What here needs improvement? And I think that's exactly, are there procedures that could be improved? Are there, responses that could be done in a different way? Are there responses that could be done by entities other than the police? We see a trend nationwide where certain kinds of responses are conducted by mental health professionals, for example, or crisis specialists rather than law enforcement. And I think, I can't remember, maybe it was a little bit of everyone mentioned that, the best way to avoid, confrontation with the police and conflict with the police is to make sure that there are real opportunities, I'm going to quote Delegate Henson, the best, I'm going to quote her inadequately because I can't remember the exact words, but her words basically are, the best crime prevention is a good paying job. And so, making sure that we are reaching out to communities where good paying jobs have not been plentiful and working to increase them and build them. Working with unions, because unions are good paying jobs, and get more of those kind of jobs into our communities, especially communities of color and our vulnerable and disenfranchised communities. So I did go a little off topic at the end there, but accountability, real independence, I think is what's going to build the trust and help build everyone up.
Thank you so much. And that was also kind of a cheat to get more explanation on what the board is currently proposed as. So again, thank you. So at this point, unfortunately, we are out of time for more questions. If participants who joined us today have additional questions, please reach out to the candidates. We have dropped a couple of links in the chat as well, one of which is to the board. Since not all of the candidates were able to join us today, the board has listed contact information, who's running where, as well as the other offices that are up for this election. And at this point, I will turn it over to Yolanda Fauntleroy.
Thank you. Wow, I wish we had more time. I enjoyed listening to all the candidates, and I want to thank you so much for being here. I know, I guess I did not say earlier that I am the co-chair of the Social Action Committee for the Annapolis Alumni Chapter. My co-chair, Sonia Johnson, unfortunately had to leave just a couple of minutes ago. But again, thank you so much to the candidates for coming. Thank you to our participants for coming this afternoon so that you could hear all of this wonderful information. And I hope that it will help you in your decision-making as you prepare to make your votes in the primaries or in the general election, hopefully both. But this was a great opportunity. Unfortunately, we could not take questions from the audience. As Michelle said, if you have additional questions, reach out to the candidates. I'm sure they would welcome hearing from you. And also don't forget that once they're elected, they still need to hear from you. So thank you all again. This was just a wonderful event. If the candidates want to drop their information in the chat before we close out all together, we would love for you to do that so that people can contact you. And again, thank you. I just can't say thank you enough. Really appreciate your time and effort for this event. Thank you all. Have a great day.